Ah, good morning. This is Daniel Posney, and this is Shifting Perspectives. And this morning we've got a pretty deep topic, and about 15 minutes to go into it. So get ready. Something I was just inspired by. I was watching a Rupert Spira video, which you can find on YouTube. He's kind of in the teachings of the non-duality and a little bit of Buddhism, but his answers are very profound and very clear. So the way that he comes to his answers, it just looks like he's really channeling in some really clear insight. And so this guy asked, I want to give you a proverb, like an Egyptian wisdom, and see what you think about it. And he said, God reveals itself according to man's ability to face the exposure of himself by himself. I say, I had to read this. I've read it about 20 times. God reveals itself according to man's ability to face the exposure of himself by himself. And I was sitting in meditation on this, and I needed to kind of pick out every bit of this statement to kind of make sure that I'm getting the right definition of things and what's being asked. But what we normally come to, this is something I searched on Google, how does God reveal itself? And usually what it says is, how does God reveal himself? So there's a little bit of a shift in there in the question. How does God reveal himself? So it usually kind of leans into that God is more of a persona or a person or more of a physical being with greatness and with divinity. And the answer usually kind of comes from that. Well, God in his infinite wisdom and his grace shows the world this presence of God through the miracles of deeds and the goodness of creation and that kind of thing. And but I was kind of struck by this card that I saw in one of these shops here in Sedona, and it really I come back to it a lot, and it says, "What is not God?" And so the goodness is also God, and the grace is God. But what about all the other stuff? If it's not God, then what is it? So that's kind of roams around in my head sometimes of, what might be the answer to that. And I have to kind of couch this whole little talk here is, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I just kind of something that's kind of running around in my mind and my heart. And so I'm going to do my best to speak clearly about what might be a possibility, or how to expand our relationship with what we call God. And I was never really satisfied, like a lot of people, I was never really satisfied with what people's idea of God was. So I pushed it away, and I just said, well, I'm not going to be against it, but I'm not going to be for what I was hearing from other people. So I just kind of put it aside for a while. I just didn't relate to it until I started to find out more about myself. And then this God realization, this God, I guess, acceptance or embracing of this idea started to come in. So that's kind of the impetus for having this conversation or this monologue. And usually when people ask, how does God reveal itself? It sometimes is coming from this question is, there's so much pain in the world. Where is God in this? When children are being abused and tortured, where is God in all this? And I think what we're really meaning to say is, if we're really clear, we're meaning to say, where is love in all this? Where is grace in all this? Where is goodness in all this? So I think it makes some sense to me to kind of really be distinct in what the words that I'm using. If I'm wanting something here, if I'm wanting God, God is in all of it. But if I'm wanting love and grace and protection and safety, and that's a different thing. But God is in every single bit of it. You can't get away from it. So if you're still here listening, I was looking for something that I could kind of pull this apart and look at when someone is seeking a deeper relationship with what we call God. And, you know, if you have a little bit of a struggle with the word God or the idea of God or that kind of thing, you could just put in love. You could put in energy, you could put in source, you could put in consciousness. It's probably all of it, but whatever works for you. I know that when I put in the word God or him, my mind, through no fault of my own, my mind wanted to stay in the physical. And this is where I'm going to go really deep here, but when I go into the physical, if I were to think about a more physical presence called God, then what is beyond the, if it's physical, what's beyond that? Like, how far is the universe? Where's the edge of the universe? And if there's an edge, what's beyond that? But if there's a beyond that, then is that physical? Is it non-physical? It just kind of blows my mind about how our ideas about what things need to be to make sense to us. And so just like in the Bible, they would say the Father. And from what I understand, that's kind of what people could understand, the Father and the Son. And that was the language that needed to be used, because this idea of God is just so ineffable. It's this indescribable idea, feeling, energy. How can you even understand it? So that's where I'm coming from. So let's look at this statement again. So God reveals itself. So first of all, identify what you're thinking about what God is. So if you're thinking that God is a presence or a loving consciousness, God reveals itself according to man's ability to face. And that's the one word that I kind of got stuck on is, what does that mean? That means really having that be in front of you and looking at it honestly and allowing it to be seen, allowing it to be accepted and embraced. And then the next part is the exposure of. So the exposure of is shining the light or illuminating something. I was going to look up the definition of it, but in my mind, it's this illumination of something. And when you illuminate something, it kind of removes all the dark little spots of something. Like if you work on the contrast and the brightness of an image, and you really turn that stuff up, it'll bring out all the darkness of that image is gone, and it's all super bright. And you might see a little bit of lines of something. So when I think about that part of the statement, the exposure of, it's like just forcing this light on something really intensely of himself. And that the himself or herself is this being, is this personality, is this character by himself. So it's not enough just so that this himself, this person, this being gets exposed by something, maybe by some event or some illness or by some life-threatening experience, that boom, this person is facing their own mortality, and they're illuminated with their exposure of who they are, like this smallness of themselves in the scheme of, that kind of thing. But it changes when you say of himself, by himself. So by himself is this self-determination, this free will to say, and this is where I want to be really clear about this part, because it's this determination to expose himself and the truth of himself. But it's not, I'm nothing. It's not God, I'm just nothing in your eyes, and making ourselves small, because that's not really the true exposure. That's also kind of an egoic thing where we say you're just nothing, you're just small. That's also kind of an egoic thing, because it's not really sharing the truth of what you are. If we really expose ourselves, let's do this. So go ahead and close your eyes. Let's do a little practice on exposing ourselves. I'd like you to think about anything about you that is physical or an idea. Let me give you some examples. So first of all, take away the country that you're born in, that you don't know the country that you're born in, but you also take away this idea that you're of no country. It's just not even a concept. You don't need it to exist. And then take away your religious affiliation or religious beliefs, that some dogma that was presented to you that you decided to hold on to just for the moment. Take away that. And then take away that you believe that Democrats are better than Republicans, or Republicans are better than Democrats, and so on. Take that out, like you have no idea what that even means. And then see what's left after that. And then take away this idea that you have a sexual preference. It just, what do you mean sexual preference? That doesn't make any sense to what I am. So you've pulled apart these things that were kind of developed over time, and then pull apart this idea that you're a bad person, you're a good person, that you should feel guilt, you should feel shame, all the kind of perceptions that could develop when, through your childhood and traumas and all that stuff. Imagine that you could just remove all that. In fact, let's just take a shortcut. Let's just imagine that you're dying. Imagine that you're getting ready to exhale your last breath. And there's that moment. So let's say you don't believe in past life or parallel lives or life after death or any of that stuff. But there is going to be a point where you exhale your last breath. And just imagine what that might be. And it might be as you're exhaling, or halfway through the exhale, or at the very end of the exhale, or beyond that exhale when your brain is still running. Now imagine what might be pulled away from the beliefs of who you've been. So imagine that all your perceptions of your personality are now, there's no energy in them. But you still have a little bit of brain activity running, just for a minute or so, maybe. Just imagine what that might be like. All of your ideas of who you are would just not be there. And what might be running through your heart, what might be running through your consciousness, I guess, if your body is dead, is grace, is love, is pure energy, consciousness, something that is indescribable. And you would be fully exposed. But being fully exposed wouldn't mean that you were small or large or not enough or not connected to. It wouldn't have any real meaning. It wouldn't have any real purpose. It would just be truth. And what is truth but God? What is truth but love? So you're left there in this full exposure of yourself by yourself. And even now, you might be going through this little meditation that we're doing, and your mind might come in with thoughts. Now, remember that you won't have any thoughts. There won't be anything to bounce them off of. There won't be any persona. There won't be any egoic identity. It'll just be truth. It'll just be this pure realization. And the question comes to mind, when I'm in that place of that ending my last breath into this microsecond or second of what's happening right now. Is that God? Is that love? Is that pure source energy? When everything is pulled away, what's left? God reveals itself according to man's ability to face the exposure of himself by himself. God reveals itself according to man's ability to face the exposure of himself by himself. And this one's is a little delicate, because if there's a man that is thinking that he's going to expose himself in order to become something, he hasn't exposed himself. So it's a kind of a slippery slope. If there's still some, I'm going to become something, I'm going to become more spiritual or more connected with God or something, and he stays in that, I've become more connected with God, or look what I've become. He still hasn't exposed himself, or at least not as much as someone could, especially like when you come to that death process. I know this is deep. This is tricky stuff. According to man's ability. So what that makes me wonder is that there are gray areas. It's not just black and white, that there are little different levels, if you will, of exposure of ourselves. And I know that sometimes I've exposed myself by myself, but up to a certain point. And then I ask myself the question, what if I really expose myself? I think about the way that I talk, the way that I use my hands, the way that my voice comes out. Those are all little aspects of my personality that haven't been exposed or let go of yet. We all walk and talk in a certain way, and we keep our certain personalities intact. But the ultimate exposure would be dying, where you've got no no structure in all that. So how does God reveal itself? You might see that every answer is the right answer, because what else is happening? This unexplainable thing, idea, energy that sometimes we call God, we can call love, is always expressing itself. It's always revealing itself. But I kind of want to change out that word reveal, because it acts like it's not there and then it shows itself. It's always there. How can something reveal itself if it's always there? So that one kind of, but it's like something that you hear a lot of. So it's those words are used. So really the problem is in the question. How does God reveal itself? How does God not reveal itself? Just determines on what your idea of God is. God reveals itself according to man's ability to face the exposure of himself by himself. And when I think about that, I think about my arms coming out to my sides, me taking a deep breath and exhaling all the way down. Sometimes this happens in breath work, other times. When I feel such surrender to the process, surrender to life, that I could live or I could die. And it's not up to me. And, it kind of reminds me of something that really helps me understand this idea of me and the world and where is God and all this stuff. You may have heard this before, but when you're dreaming and you're having a dream and something is happening, last night I was clearing the ice off of a roof with my brother. He was scraping the ice off, and I was thinking about that dream. Me, the dreamer, I was the one feeling the dream. I was feeling the height of where I was standing, And it was a little bit scary there being on that high place, but it wasn't the dreamt person in the dream. It was me, the dreamer in bed, that was feeling that. And of course, we get little twitches and we get little emotions, and little parts of our system start activating from these little emotions and feelings. So really, it's not the dreamt, it's not the character that's feeling and experiencing the dream, it's the dreamer. So then the question becomes, what about this life? What about me here sitting on this couch here? Who is feeling this? Maybe it's not the dreamt character. Maybe it's the dreamer. Who's the dreamer? Well, can't be something physical, because this is physical. It's something beyond physical. What is that? Consciousness, love, God, source energy, whatever you want to call it. That's the experiencer. That's the one that's doing the feeling. And I'm the dreamt character here. So then if you pair that together with the whole God reveals itself according to man's ability to face the exposure of himself. What is that exposure? The exposure is that you're not really here, or you're not really the experiencer that you think you are. That there's an animator to your body and to your experience that's actually the experiencer. And if you ever hear anyone talking about experiencing someone dying, and there's all these stories about near-death experiences and where they go, and this person remembers their past life to a T and all that. So there's some stories in there that can't be explained. And if you ever talk to someone that's experienced someone dying right in front of them, sometimes people are so close and they've got their hand on their arm or something, and the moment that they after they take their last breath, there's a little moment that they're still kind of there, and then they feel this energy, their spirit, their soul leaving their body, and they can feel it. They can feel the energy of their body kind of have, like, they can tell they're gone. They're that person that I was interacting with, they're not in the body anymore. So that's the exposure, is that who you are is this animator, which is this non-physical divine essence, if you will. So what can I do? What can I do to cause more of that God revealing itself to me? Yeah. Sometimes in that moment where you take the time to be in nature and you watch how the animals are behaving, and watch how these animals are created so perfectly to do what they need to do, that the stripes in their bodies are their protection, that the skunk has this smell that protects it, that there's all this perfection going on. And then I hear beautiful music, and I'm reminded that, it's all of it. But sometimes it takes that, God, I hate to use this word because I've seen it in a movie, but quintessence, or this essence, unexplainable. And it's hard for me to see it when I'm going, and my mind is so busy. So when I work with people, the people that are heavily in their head, it's hard for them to have that God reveal to them. But the people that I find that are more connected to nature, more connected to their heart and their feelings and subtle energies, it's more naturally felt. So the best way that I found to get more of that revealing itself to me is to expose myself by opening up my heart. So whatever I can do to open up my heart. I've got enough knowledge with psychology and metaphysics and spirituality that's just happened over the years. But lately it's just been, okay, now keep opening up your heart, because that's the part that I feel that God being revealed to me when I expose myself. And isn't that kind of the greatest exposure? Once you get beyond exposing what you don't know and your egoic self and all that stuff, that's one thing. But then saying, okay, now I'm going to expose my heart. I'm going to see the world with compassion. And what's come up for me lately, what I'm working on is blessing, is realizing that we're all able to bless. So if you're kind of following along where I'm going with this, that we're not separate from God, that it's not a separate thing that we need to strive to be around or to see in the world, that we can't get away from it actually, then we have the ability, when we're in our heart, when we're in that joyful heart, that we can actually bless. And we don't need to know too much more about it, except for having love in our heart and blessing. And if you have a hard time with blessing yourself or loving yourself, just bless a glass of water and drink it. Bless another being, bless a bird or a mouse or whatever. And you can't get away from thereby blessing yourself. So I guess I just want to practice more of not blessing out of I'm more devout or spiritual than anything or anyone, but it just feels good. It feels good to just let that come out. And I always think about after my death. So I always think about, like, what could I have done more of? And I didn't want to make more widgets or do more activity, but wow, couldn't I just, before I left, blessed a little bit more? Like, as you're heading out the door, bless you one more time, bless you. Okay, one more time. I'm going to bless you before I leave. May you all be blessed. I'm leaving. That kind of thing. Maybe I didn't answer any questions today. Maybe it just kind of opened things up, and maybe I just exposed myself. So thank you so much for being here. I love you, and bless you, bless you, bless you.